Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we have a special guest. We have Joe from JT Follows JC on YouTube, or JT's Mixtapes, if you're listening to podcasts. He's also pretty active on social media, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you are active, he is also very active. And I had him on to give a little bit more insight into this Vatican thing that we've been falling down this rabbit hole. It's been nuts. But before we get into it, of course, I like to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. If you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a month, go to rabbithole.gold right now to sign up. Hi, JT. Thank you so much for coming on The Rabbit Hole.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm really excited about this. So I have been on a Vatican kick lately. So normally how my podcast works is like I put out one episode about whatever topic. If there's more information that I just can't cover in the first episode, I do a part 2. Well, I've done 2 parts of the Vatican and I'm working on part 3 right now. And I don't know yet until I'm done with part 3 if I'm going to need a part 4. But you're going to be like sprinkled in the middle here of this.
Okay.
Like,
all right. Cool.
Vatican deep rabbit hole that I have fallen down. And it is wild. It is wild. So the reason I reached out to you is I actually had somebody message me on Instagram and they were like, hey, this guy kind of put out this type of this type of conspiracy and it kind of goes like this. And like, I think you should cover that on the Vatican. I was like, all right, cool. So I reached out to you, but let me read what he wrote me. So that way everybody knows kind of where we're starting here.
Okay.
So basically that around 500 to 800 AD, the second coming of Christ already happened. And so the 1,000 years of like prosperity, that's when like Tartaria was here, like all the like the ancient civilizations that had all the technology had already like blossomed and grown and everything was like beautiful and awesome, right? Because Jesus was here. And then and it was like God's kingdom. But then for the millennial reign came to an end. And now we're in the small season where Satan reigns, which we're seeing a lot of that where we're like the Vatican seems very evil. Like the more research I do into it, the more I'm like, I think they're worshiping the devil or doing the devil's work here. I don't think that they're actually worshiping God and Jesus. I think that something weird is happening. I'm a new believer. And so I know I have a lot of listeners that have like followed me on this faith journey. So I'm like, I have not read through the entire Bible yet. I'm like very new to all of this. So I figured you're probably the guy to have on and talk about this.
Well, yeah, I hope I am. Yeah, so I've been doing kind of Christian conspiracy stuff for about 4 years now. And this has been the deepest rabbit hole, no pun intended, is this idea that Jesus came back in the past. And because a lot of us who specifically started out as Christian conspiracy theorists, we would be looking for this future Antichrist. We'd be looking for the third temple in Jerusalem. We'd be looking for, the mark of the beast and all the stuff. Everybody, all the Left Behind movies talk about.
Yeah.
But recently, I think that through doing some research and through all kinds of things, because like I said, that was only part of what I was doing. That was like the focus of it, but it was all leading to these other, following all these other conspiracies down the rabbit hole. And then eventually you find people start talking about the old world and Tartaria and the mud flood and all the weird stuff. And you're just like, it's really interesting. It does seem like there's a lot of evidence that something happened, but I have no idea where to place any of this.
Right. The timeline doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But I mean, even so, it's just kind of like I remember as a Christian guy, I'm like, yeah, I know that. So when Jesus comes back, they're going to be this 1,000 years of peace. And then after that, then eventually you get to new heaven and new earth and everything like that. But what do I do with this weird anomaly in our past? It seems like, that looks really weird. I thought it was supposed to kind of get worse until Jesus came back. So what's up with this time in the middle that seems like it might have been it might have been more advanced than here.
Yeah.
Then so that was just really bizarre. And then I guess to me, it's like a lot of conspiracies when it goes from like 9/11 to, whatever, is that until you start to look into it, like, okay, so I just want to, maybe even Flat Earth's a good example of this. It's like that I never really wanted to go to be a flat earther or a biblical earther, but I just started to ask questions because I was literally trying to debunk some of this stuff because I just wanted an answer.
Right.
And it's funny when you start to go try to ask answers like to seem like simple questions, you either get resistance from people or they start to stiffen up, or there's just no answers at all. And I think that to me it was like, okay, so what's up with the mud flood? What,
Yeah.
like, can anyone explain that? Like, is there even a mainstream academic explanation for the mud flood? And you find out there's not. So you're like, well, there's definitely evidence that it's like it's in every city. Every
Yeah.
city you go
Every
to,
single. Yeah.
there's the oldest buildings seem like they have these kind of quasi basements, or sometimes they have multiple levels under the ground, and then the stairs go up to at least the second floor. And you see like when the streets, like when you see like the windows kind of disappear as the street kind of angles up,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, they did. I like I said, I'm by trade. I was like, I originally my day job is construction. I'm like, people don't build buildings like that. They
Yeah, like
certainly
that's
don't build
odd.
buildings. Yeah, they don't build buildings like that here, and especially. So I live in southeastern Virginia, so I'm really close to Norfolk, Virginia. It's like 7 feet above sea level, and so they say that like we've always just kind of long accepted you don't we don't have basements around here because it would flood, and Norfolk floods every time there's a major storm. So, but then you go down, all the old buildings they all have basements in downtown Norfolk,
Yeah,
and they all
you're like
have
that doesn't make
and
any
they all have
sense.
tunnels that connect the other buildings together. You're like, that does not make any sense
No.
whatsoever. So yeah, so
Yeah,
all
that's
that being said,
weird.
I heard somebody connect. What if those impressive old buildings are evidence that Jesus already did come back? And I remember being thinking like, I really didn't like that idea, but it actually kind of really resonated with me, like because I'm
I
really
can,
looking forward to that. So like, I
right.
don't really want that to be true, and I think that's in the same vein. I like looked and I tried to disprove it, and the more I tried to disprove it, I started to read the Gospels again. I started to read all the letters from the apostles, and the imminency of Christ's return is very clear if you can pay attention to what the gospel is actually saying. Jesus shows up at a very specific time based on the 70-week prophecy in Daniel. Like it
Mm-hmm.
leads it that prophecy is about the second temple being built, the temple being rebuilt, and then leading to the end of this prophecy, the Messiah shows up. So that's literally like when Jesus shows up, like to like the day of when the prophecy says he's supposed to be there. And this is ultimately a prophecy of Jesus and the end times. See, the difference is the modern church says they kind of cut off the end of the last week and they say, oh, that's a future event. But the Bible never says that. The Bible just says there's this 70 weeks and then this happens and then this happens.
Right.
And so when you think about that being the time that, certain people crucified Jesus, and then there was judgment that came after that. Like, so that's basically what happened. I mean, it makes sense too. Like that if you don't know that Jesus predicts the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13. And he says, before this generation passes away, all these things will take place. So in 70 AD, at least the chronology we are told,
Mm-hmm.
that the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, fulfilled the prophecies that Jesus said. And so Jesus, in those same prophecies, says he'll also return during that time. So
So
like
then it
so
makes sense.
so he says this happened. So now what's interesting is what you said around 5 to 800 AD. You were saying that's when Jesus came back. I
That's
found
what
a.
sorry,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
didn't mean to interrupt. That's just what this guy that wrote in said. So I was like just reading exactly what he told me because I was like I don't know well enough to say yes or no. So that's why I was giving that to you.
Oh no, yeah, no, I wasn't saying you were saying that, but I was saying, but that's what the
Yeah.
message said. And so what somebody would say is like, okay, so if Jesus said he was returning in the first century, how does it make sense that he returned in like the sixth to the ninth century? Well, this is the interesting part. I think the more you probably do kind of do some research into like all the conspiracies, and especially like the chronology history,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's kind of weird that you really think about why do we even have like a BC AD chronology? Like, why did they have a chronology that was before and then they just decided to start a new one?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, of course, as a Christian, you say, well, obviously, this is before Christ, and then AD is Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord. I mean, either way, it's very significant that at one point the world decided, let's just change the whole calendar based on Jesus being here. And then it's literally written into the calendar saying that if this is the year 2025,
Hmm.
it's AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Our Lord who? Or Lord Jesus Christ. I mean, it's kind of amazing that people just kind of just don't even really think about that. It's just like they live in a Christian world and they don't even know why. And like then it seems like over the last, I mean, our lifetimes, obviously even before this, there's been trying to like erode a lot of the Christian values, and there's a lot of
Yes.
shade thrown at colonization, Christianization. You know that's a bad thing now. But there was a time where obviously this dominated the whole world. Now, but the really interesting part about this is through this research, we stumbled upon this presentation by this really interesting sociologist, professor, historian named Gunnar Heinzen. And he was doing some research into the chronology. And so, fortunately, he passed recently, but like he had this 2016 presentation from Toronto, and he was showing that based on the stratigraphy, like the strata would basically show the layers of like the sediment and obviously the older civilizations being under,
Right.
the newer civilizations being over. And so if over like 1,000 years, you'd have many layers of things being built upon other things. And so what's fascinating, again, you learn like kind of this idea about like the dark ages. So why is it called the dark ages? Well, people would say that the reason there's a dark ages is because like they would think that people were just backward and uncultured. But that's not why historians call this period the Dark Ages. They call it that because there was no advancement in architecture, language, or culture
Hmm.
for like 1,000 years. So that's the really fascinating part. It's like so Gunnar Heinzen, through the research of like archaeology in the strata, he was saying like that there in the first 1,000 years, year 1 or 0 to 1,000 AD, there's 700 false years added in there. There's years that are added into that part of like the calendar. And it makes sense because all those buildings, all the architecture, all the art, all the language, it's because it was all in the same time period. That's why the buildings all look the same, because they were all built on the same strata level. And so you find all these layers of these buried Roman buildings. There's nothing underneath them. There's no like you can't find like even so all the way from early antiquity, late antiquity, mid antiquity, and late antiquity. All these buildings are built at the exact same strata level. Nothing's built on top of each other.
Hmm.
And the reason for the discrepancy is that we're told there was a collapse of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, in early antiquity by the barbarians. And then so in mid antiquity, the Eastern Roman Empire fell based on this massive cataclysm with like, like I don't know if you've ever been down the rabbit hole about 536 AD.
I haven't.
This was a year that started 18 months of darkness, a mini ice age, the bubonic plague, wars, famines. Lots of people say that there was collapses in the Mayan civilization, Europe, and all over the world,
Interesting.
all the way through
That's
China
weird.
to the South Pacific. Yeah, and they what they try to their conclusion is it was because of volcanoes, but there's really no good evidence of that. That's just like
They're just like,
the
yeah, they're
sun
like,
got blotted out for 18 months, and they assumed that it must have been ash and you know volcanic activity. And then he also says there was a collapse in late antiquity in Europe, and the northern part of Europe collapsed. So, but what he said was, or his conclusion was, that all those collapses was actually one collapse. Because if you really think about it, like the one in mid antiquity, it reaches all the way to China and all the way to the Mayans.
yeah,
So it's to America, to East
it's like
Asia.
around the whole world.
It's the whole world. I mean, obviously, if the sun goes dark for 18 months, there's a
Yeah,
mini ice age afterwards. It's going to affect Northern Europe too,
yeah,
and Eastern and Western Europe. So yeah, what his point was is that what he concluded that up to 90% of people in the world could have died during this time. And
that
it was
makes
like
sense.
literally this was like your reset. And so this was his conclusion, which was like unbelievably on the nose for the things we're researching. His conclusion was in Revelation chapter 20, it mentions that that Satan was bound for 1,000 years. And then after the 1,000 years is over, he's released. And so this is obviously when you have your millennial reign. So what he believed was that the people decided to start dating things at 1,000 because they believed they lived after the book of Revelation had taken place.
Wow.
Yeah,
So then,
exactly.
so what time are we living in now?
Well, so like that, like the person in the message said, he was Gunnar Heinsohn was starting to believe that. I mean, again, it's hard to know for sure because I think he even
Right.
had problems with some of the other chronology. But let's just say instead of trying to date things backwards, like to push the first century back further, what he really did, he was kind of moved it up. So you could say that Jesus likely lived in maybe like the 700s.
Hmm.
And so if you think about maybe if 700 was the year Jesus was born ish, then he was crucified 730, and then maybe the temple was destroyed in 770,
Okay.
which is kind of interesting because a lot of people have, in doing this research, we've concluded that it does seem like there was some funny business right around 1776, where you
Yeah.
have like obviously the Illuminati being established,
Right.
America being established, San Francisco's founded, and then I think you even have right after that you have the French Revolution. There's lots of revolutions going on, and then the 1800s is off the rails crazy.
Yeah.
So a lot of people maybe in this community have concluded that it's likely there was 1,000 years, then you get to 1776, and you have like the "Don't Tread on Me." You have is that when the devil was let out for his little season?
Because then the 1800s are wild.
Absolutely crazy, and everything happens in the 1800s. Everything burns down. Everything's rebuilt. Every technology we use today was invented like in the 1800s or the early
Early
1900s.
1900s. Because then there's the theory that the world wars were actually they the point of them was to destroy the rest of like I guess all the old buildings and stuff in Europe. That's a theory that I have run across recently. So it's like, what were they trying to get rid of, or what were they trying to do? So I guess my question is, okay, so Jesus was supposed to reign for 1,000 years, right? He comes back, he's here for 1,000 years. So then, how long is Satan supposed to be here? Another 1,000 years? Or are we just switching off 1,000 year time
Um,
periods?
well, here's the thing. It says so in the Revelation chapter 20, it mentions multiple times that there's 1,000 year period, and that the
Mm-hmm.
devil is so. The key points are that during the 1,000 years, the devil is chained up and put in a pit. The saints are resurrected to reign with Jesus. Now it mentions that two times, and it says then the devil must be loose for a little season or a short season. It
Okay.
does not say how long the little season is. What it says is that when the devil is released, he goes out and he deceives the nations and he brings them all together to basically create an army to go fight against Jesus in the camp of the saints. And so then fire comes down from heaven on that army. Now, so it's been my conclusion. There's some people who say, okay, little season would make sense. What if it was 250 years? Well, if it's 250 years, obviously it's coming to the end,
Right. We're almost there.
like tomorrow. But if it's not, I think that if the Bible doesn't list a specific amount of time that this period's supposed to be, then I think that it could maybe depend on us
I was
because
wondering about that too.
if it's about the devil needing to deceive people to form an army in rebellion against God, well, I believe that obviously that has something to do with the hearts of men. Is that if we're willing to be deceived, we don't love the truth, and we're accepting the lies of the devil, well, then I think that it's as long as it takes. But I mean, I think that there's good biblical examples that when prophets have gone to cities and they say judgment is coming unless you guys repent, and then they repent, and then the judgment is stayed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible if it's similar in that way that if people are still hungry for the truth and they're still pursuing Jesus, then the devil won't be able to deceive people as fast.
I wonder about that because we see all kinds of like really shady things start popping up in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then they have just kind of like rode that wave. And then we see like this downfall within the last, I don't know, like 30 years, 20 years maybe, of like people are like, nope, we don't believe in God anymore. We're going to take that out of schools. We're going to take that out of everything. Like we're done. We don't pray before things. We don't like everything's out. Like if you want to believe in God, you go do that on Sunday at your church or whatever you do. Like you do that in the privacy of your own home. Like almost like so taboo. But then I don't know about you, but recently, and maybe I've noticed this in my life just because of like the path that I've been on, is like I feel like there's this pull back towards believing and back towards God, like almost like God is like working in people's lives really heavily right now to like bring people back to him. Does that make
N- n-
sense?
No, absolutely. I've seen that a little bit too, because it was funny because I was talking with a buddy, and I think they were saying like, what is it, the Zoomers? Is that the newest generation? They were talking
I
about
don't
how much
know.
more conservative they are than like the Boomers. And it
Yeah,
kind of makes sense because obviously, as crazy as everything's gotten, it's like, what's the best way to rebel against this? Is to try to go back toward traditional values, and it's like the trad wife is coming back. That's
it
like in
is.
style and
Yeah.
things like that, and that's what some people want. And so maybe maybe the pendulum is swinging. I mean, I'd like to think that people who are obviously preaching Jesus and preaching like that what's right and what's wrong, and you have so many people who are influencers and maybe actually are doing what they're supposed to influence people in a positive way, then it is having an effect. I mean, it's what I started doing besides talking about things like the end times. I started pointing out little things like in pop culture, like, hey, look at all these subtle, really evil things that are in there, and now that people can
Yep.
recognize the signs, so maybe people are. It was once crazy to say, oh, they all worship the devil. Like the first time you ever heard that,
Yeah.
you were like, what are you talking about?
Like
Like that is
that's
so,
impossible. That's crazy. Yeah.
yeah, that is insane. I was once like that. My brother used to say that. It's like, oh yeah, they all worship Satan. I was like, what? All of them. And I
Every
was
single one.
like,
You're saying every single one.
yeah, exactly. And then
Yes.
I remember showing one of my friends from high school when I was first starting to do this, and everybody thought I was crazy then, is that yeah, like LeBron James is doing his little ritual before the game and he's throwing up all the gang signs and all this
Yep.
stuff. And I was like, yeah, he doesn't serve the same God as us. And they're like, what do you really think he worships the devil? And I was like, well, I don't think he would say it that way, but yeah, pretty much. And then all like lots of those my friends who were like once saying you're nuts, dude, they've come around and they said, okay, it makes sense now.
Well, and
And
the
so I
more you
think
look
that,
into it,
well, wait, I guess it's if I think like anything that when you do get a little bit conspiratorial, that you have to just say, okay, all right, God, I just want to know what's true. But it's kind of be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you
yeah.
learn things, and if you're willing to accept things based on like the evidence and what God is kind of leading you to believe, yeah, it can make you real sick sometimes at the beginning, but eventually you're like, yeah, it's again like going back into the things we were talking about earlier. It's like trying to debunk things for your own sake, because I'm sure just like you, when you put yourself out for in these platforms, people either challenge what you said or they try to tell you about these new conspiracies and things that you don't
Hmm.
really want to believe, or they disagree with your point. So what you try to go do your due diligence. You try to go give them an answer. You try to give them an answer, yay or nay. And so a lot of times you're trying to disprove the thing somebody said, and then you're like, they
Dang
might be
it.
right. Dang it.
Wait a second. I don't try to disprove anything. So I guess I don't know. Like I go into every conspiracy, like every episode that I do, I go in, like I put myself in the mindset that whatever the conspiracy is, it's 100% true. Because
Mm-hmm.
I find that I do my best research to present the information if I fully believe in the conspiracy while I'm researching it. After that, like my opinion doesn't matter. I'm not trying to tell you what my opinion is. I'm trying to
Mm.
just give you the conspiracy to let you believe what you want to believe. That was my whole like the whole thing that I wanted to do when I started this conspiracy theory podcast. I was like, here's the history, here's what the world says, here's what the conspiracy theorists are saying. You come up with your conclusion, but the history isn't quite adding up. And then, like on my Patreon, I do an opinions episode where I tell them like if I believed or I don't believe in whatever conspiracy
Mm-hmm.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't found a lot that I don't believe in, just because like
They make
I
more sense. That most of them make more sense. You're like,
they
yeah,
do.
that's me is when I've gone. I remember going to school, and especially, I think most people probably can relate to it. It's like the history class. was so boring.
So
It was
boring.
so unimportant. The dates and the events and the all disconnected, and they don't even
It was
teach
so
you in a very
random.
linear fashion. It makes
Yeah.
no sense, and all you're really doing is just memorizing things. But like a person like me, I remain this way that I'm really curious. And so like we'd be like learning about World War I a little bit, and I'd be like, wait a minute, why did it start?
Yeah. It
Can
doesn't
you
make
go
any
back
sense.
and like can we start at the beginning? Like, so why were they all going to war? And then yeah, like you start to ask questions about World War II, and be careful what you ask about that war.
I've
But you
got
start
I've got a lot
asking,
of questions about World War II.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, those are not safe for YouTube.
No, no,
the
we won't
answers aren't
be.
anyways. But
We'll
no,
we'll
but
talk about that on Patreon or something else.
yeah, for sure. But no, it isn't really interesting that when you have heard the mainstream history about things, you're just like, and I remember just always kind of scratching my head. It's like, I don't know, that just doesn't make any sense. And then you start hearing the conspiracy, and you're like,
Wait a second.
that makes sense. That
Yep.
actually makes way more sense than everything we were ever taught. And I think that's why so many people, like I'm sure that's like podcasts like yours are doing well, because most people are like, okay, so if they lied about that,
What
what
else?
else are they lying about? And then you find out
Everything.
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 It's like the devil is out loose and he's deceiving everybody, and all the people in charge are being influenced by him. And that's why we don't even know which ways up. But that's why we don't even know what the shape of the world is anymore.
Right. And then people are like, "Oh my gosh, it could not be flat. Are you kidding me? Why would they lie about that?" I'm like, "I don't know, but the you know what I do know? I know that they've lied about this long list of things. So am I a flat earther? No, I don't think so. Am I a round earther? Absolutely not. I don't think I know, but the fact is, I know that they're lying about so many things that like they're like this is too big. It's too big. They wouldn't lie about this. Well, okay, 9/11 was too big. 3,000 people died that day.
Yeah.
That's too big. But guess what? Like, and it goes on and on and on. You're telling me, and like I said, I'm down this Vatican rabbit hole right now. So it's like consuming my brain. You're telling me that these people who have been in charge of the Catholic Church for since Jesus, that they're
Supposedly.
doing the right, yeah, supposedly, right? Like that they're doing the right thing when there's so many conspiracies about them. And it's like almost the same thing over and over, but it's just in different contexts.
Yeah. Well, you have like
So
the,
big.
the thing about like the Vatican. I think that most of us who kind of like in this community talk about is the Vatican Vault, the library. They
Yeah.
have it's about. I've heard different numbers, but I think it's over 50 miles worth of bookshelves.
53 miles
Yeah,
is what
53
I
my
found in my research.
yeah, so over 50 miles worth of bookshelves. And why would a religious Christian organization have a secret vault of books? Like, what the heck is in there?
And
And
why
I
can't
think
we
that,
see it? Aren't we supposed to be transparent?
well, it's funny that you hear like these stories about the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the times the Romans burned, I guess, that library in Egypt. And people talk about all the knowledge that was lost and all the things. And then I think there was also a time in Rome where there was all these libraries, the records got burned.
Hmm.
What if those records didn't get burned?
I don't know if
That's
we
where
did.
they're what if that's where they're at? And I think a lot of the questions we have about our history, our past, what if that's in those vaults? I mean, because I've wondered this. It was funny because a lot of people have obviously been talking about the Vatican recently because we got a new American Pope,
Yep.
and not Trump, believe it or not, even after he posted the picture of
That was
himself.
stupid. That was so dumb.
I know, that's what I
Come
said. I was
on.
like, he's such a jackass.
I
And but yeah, so that people have been talking about this Malachi prophecy that has something to do with the last pope and the end of the world. I heard before that Francis was the last pope, so now they're trying to move it back. Now there's another last pope. Whatever.
no, I thought that Francis was the last pope.
Yeah, right. Because the people that wrote books about that, and now they're trying to say, oh, there's one more space on the wall, so this is the last pope. But I was, of course, me being a skeptic of a lot of things. I said, well, can you pan back to show me all the spaces on the wall? Do you think maybe they only put that little that pie tray up there because it's just the next one, and there's room for more if
Right.
there's more popes? But the Malachi prophecy, I believe it had something to do with there was 112. I could have this number wrong. 112 this unbroken line of popes, and then you
Hmm.
get to like the 112th one. It's the last one. But see, in this Gunnar Heinsohn research, in this kind of timeline research, I think there's a bunch of false popes just put in there that it has nothing to do with because the way they're trying to describe history is that they have this unbroken chronology
Yeah.
of popes. In the same way, even during Rome, they had this unbroken line of Caesars. I don't think that that's true anymore. I think that you find coins and you have guys who look like they could have been emperors, but were they all emperors, or could they have been a king of a different province of Rome? In the same way that you have governors, and like even think about our money. Just because you find a coin with a guy's head on it does not mean he was a president. Benjamin
Right.
Franklin's on like the biggest bill we've got,
And he
right?
wasn't a
So,
president. Yeah.
but he was not a president. But if imagine if history was like a lot of history got mixed up, they would start to say, "Oh, well, Benjamin Franklin was the third president because look how
Right.
influential he was," and they would try to do things like that because I think that's what the interesting part is. Like the Gunnar Heinsohn was saying that what he believed is a lot of people did not try to distort our history because of malice. They had any kind of ill intentions. It was literally like, here's 1,000 years, and the history is really hazy. So they did their best to try to fill it in.
Well, doesn't it say, and please understand that I am not very well versed in the Bible, but I'm pretty sure I just read recently that like literally history is just one generation away. Or like I think it was in the context of like believing in God. Like it's only one generation away of like being wiped away, right? And so like if we don't have that history correctly, we're one generation away from being wiped away. And that doesn't change now just because like they have decided whatever the history is, and maybe it wasn't ill-intended. I think that it was, but I think that we have all these books, all these things that they're like, this is what the history is, you believe it this way. Well, we only have that book or that history to go off of because we are one generation away. So that old generation, they're dead. They can't tell us what they learned.
Well, I would say that I'm not saying that certain people don't have ill intentions. I would say that like this is how like that people would ask about how could they hide the shape of what the Earth is. How
Right.
could everybody at NASA be lying? Because not everyone is lying. Some people just obviously they're going through and they're believing what they're told, and they're just this one little cog in the system.
Yeah.
You kind of think about it like when you get to talk about like climate change and all that, and they're like all of this consensus of like 99% of scientists agree. Well, who pays the grants? Like who allows them to do the research they're doing? It's like if you start to question certain science, well, then you will be a pariah
Mm-hmm.
and you will not get funding and you won't be able to do this. You won't be able to work in academia. So a lot of people have accepted the parameters that they're given, the facts, right? The facts as
Mm-hmm.
they know them. And then so they work in between them. Obviously, somebody who establishes where you're allowed to research in the field, those are the people who are obviously the gatekeepers and the controllers, and they're the people trying to, they have a narrative. But yeah, you're absolutely right, is that if you really think about it, you go back and so like the buildings, this is probably people's favorite part about this conspiracy. It's just because you can go through any town in basically any old town in USA and you can see Greco-Roman things, weird cathedrals, just stuff that we can't or we don't build anymore.
Yeah.
And you really think about it. Okay, so let's just say that building was built in 1890 because most of them were that kind of time range.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's nobody alive who was there to see it built. So if somebody told you that, they built it in 1 year in 1894, then like who are you really to argue with that? I mean,
You wouldn't
and
know any better.
and if you don't really know what you're looking at or why you're looking at it, you would say, well, it's there to somebody, they built it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no really reason to question that. It's really only now that most of us have started to question the very short timeline of American history. And we've just concluded that it doesn't make sense in the timeline. I believe that people could have built those buildings. I mean, because I think that a lot of the more impressive ones are kind of Greco-Roman style.
Mm-hmm.
So if we believe the Romans built those kind of buildings back, what we're told is 2,000 years ago, well, then why would it be really hard to believe that people in America could do the same thing? It's really not. The only real issue is is that we're told that we have like frontiermen, we got miners going across to the western part of the country,
Yeah.
and they're going over with wagons and donkeys and families and
And no technology.
no technology. There's no infrastructure, and they're just going across to the western part of the country. And then when they get there, they said, "Hey, let's just build a city. Let's just build San Francisco."
Right. It's like so random too. You're like, okay, right here. We're gonna build a city right here. This feels good.
Yeah, and everything. And if you obviously if you see the aerial views of these places, the grid patterns are the same. It's like, I mean, the way I think about it, especially like I said, being in building, you think this took a lot of central planning. This took a lot of, like getting the groundwork done, laying
Yeah.
out the roads. But what we're told is these people were just going out there in 1849 to search for gold. So they're miners. So are they in the mines at the daytime? So when are they building all
Right.
the
They're like
buildings?
building on the weekends
They're building the city. They're doing all the stonework and brickwork,
in a
and they're just
year while in the mines.
yeah, and they're doing all this stuff. But I mean, so San Francisco is a great example because I think in 1848 they say there was 1,000 people lived in San Francisco, and then you have the Gold Rush, 1849, the 49ers, and then there's a lot. But the very first pictures you see of San Francisco, it's a full grown city. It looks just like it does today. I mean, it's for its most
Weird.
part, it's huge. Like right
Yeah.
away. So like in the 1850s, you see pictures of it. It's already got people in it. And then I think the very earliest like big panoramic shots, like from 1870, they pan around the whole city. It's there. And then San Francisco, and here's the kind of like it feels like this is like the we got 'em situation, is that we're told that the Spanish discovered San Francisco in 1776. Well,
Again, a
it
sun
appears, yeah, it appears on old maps from the 1500s where there's multiple maps in between where it says San Francisco, right where it's at, or it says S Francisco or San Fran, something like that. It's like it's right where it's at. And this is all these times leading up to
when it was
before it was
discovered.
even discovered. So a lot of people have concluded that maybe these cities were already there. Maybe they were founded. Maybe that's what that means by when they say they founded this city in 1850. It's because they literally did just
They
find
just
it.
went over there and found it. There it
It was
was.
like an abandoned place, and they found these places. It sounds insane, but it's to me it makes more sense than the history we're taught. And so I think that's where people have concluded, like, yeah, that maybe this is where all this funny business happened was like maybe around 1776. And that's kind of like as old as the history we're taught in America. And even like the 1800s is kind of glazed over. It's more like
Yeah.
about
We get to the late
Revolutionary War,
1800s. Yeah.
Revolutionary War, Civil War,
Hmm.
and then we jump all the way to like modern
World War One.
times.
We like just skip to the wars. We're like, okay, here's the Revolutionary War, then the Civil War, and then World War One.
Right. And so like so then you don't even think about like that. I guess that was kind of a mind-blowing thing for me. It was just that I had no idea that cities in America were so new, that they were literally were only like 150 years old, sometimes
Yeah.
only like 100 years old. Like it's like cities like Seattle that they're like they didn't even do anything there until like the very late 1800s. And as soon as you see it, it's Seattle. And there's also
Yeah, it's
underground parts
weird.
to all these. There's all underground parts
Yes.
to all these cities too.
Yep. San Francisco, Seattle,
All of
both of
them.
them.
Portland,
LA.
Portland,
Yeah.
yeah, Portland, Sacramento, San Diego. I started to look around the West because there's underground parts of all of them. And so you think about it like, I already don't believe that they built these cities in the timeline they say. And then when I learned the next level of it is that they built a city under the city and all these cities.
Which
So
doesn't
now
make any
you're
sense
like,
either. Like,
now
why do
you're
you do
like,
that?
why would anybody? Well, I mean, the point is like that would be so much harder to do that. Whether they did it before, so they would have
Chicago
dug
has an
tunnels.
underground too, right?
Was that Chicago?
Yeah, doesn't they have an underground?
Chicago, they all the cities do. I'm telling you, like literally, like kind of like when we talk about the elites who worship the devil, we say it's all of them.
It's,
The
yeah.
cities, it's all of them. Like literally,
Well, then the
I mean,
tunnels that connect the national parks as well.
there's tunnels everywhere. It's funny. So what is that? Catherine Fitz was just on Tucker Carlson talking about like somebody in the Bush administration said there was a $21 trillion
Yeah.
underground bunker system. And I said, I really wish I could have just been on there. Like, there's the tunnels were already there. I mean, I don't doubt that they fitted our governments has like obviously modernized lots
Yeah.
of them, but the tunnels are already there. It's kind of like that when you do go down the rabbit hole of the underground stuff. When you hear like the mainstream history about, oh yeah, there's these tunnels under Chicago or under Seattle, under Portland, and they're always meant to be used for like nefarious things. Oh, this is a prohibition era thing where
Mm-hmm.
they'd carry the moonshine down the tunnels. But the tunnels were already there
Yeah.
because it's not like that to avoid the cops, they're literally tunneling under the city because that would be kind of impractical and they would get caught doing that.
They
The
would get
tunnels are
caught.
already there. So it's almost like let's not even discuss why there's this very elaborate, massive, expansive underground area of the city. We're just going to talk about, oh, they were hiding booze down there. Well, they could
Well,
hide whatever they wanted down there.
yeah, they always like covered up because like in Seattle and in San Francisco, right? They both had a fire, both of them. And it was
All of them.
like they had this big fire and it burned down, but we just built a city on top. And to me, like that never made any sense. I was like,
Right.
okay, my parents' house burned down. We did not just build a new house just on top of it. Like they ended up just moving and buying a new house, but like you're gonna get rid of all of that and start over. You're not just gonna build a new city on top of it, and that doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't be very stable. The first time I heard that, I was like, that
Exactly.
literally makes no sense. Why would you just build a new city on top of a city that burned down? And the whole city burned down? How did that happen?
Right. Well, what is it? I actually had the exact same thought process you did. I said, like, what do you mean you built it on top of something that burned
Yeah,
down?
that's
So if
not very
it burned
stable.
down, did it burn all the way down to the ground? Because then you could have built on top of it. But if it didn't burn all the way down,
Like we have tunnels, so it didn't, right?
so what did you do? You buried it after it burned down? Like so I don't like I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're talking about because to me, yeah, you're in construction, you need a level foundation. So having something that was just suffered fire and is probably not structurally sound doesn't make a lot of sense. That so how did it get buried though?
Yeah,
Did you guys put out the fire with a bunch of
with
dirt?
dirt. But like that's a
Yeah, and
lot of dirt. That's a lot.
you covered the whole city. It honestly makes again, it's like it's something you think about for like 5 seconds. You're like, this doesn't actually make any sense. So that
No.
doesn't seem like it would be easier to do anything or more convenient. It would be way worse.
But it's like the little like pieces that they just throw out. They're like, "Oh, here's the explanation." And then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, cool." They move on.
Right. It's like that. That's what I said when people say, "So what is the explanation for all this stuff?" I said they really don't have one. They just say they did it, and people are just like, "Oh yeah." I
They're
mean,
so
it's there. So I
blind.
mean, like obviously they did it. It's kind of like you have underground Atlanta too, and it's
Yeah.
really just kind of like a real small part of Atlanta, but it's just like a shopping mall and strip malls down there. But you really think about it, like
I
why
want
would
to
it
go
just be
there.
that? Why would anyone just build that just for that? I bet
Yeah,
you
I don't
I
know.
bet you it's way more expansive. I bet you probably goes under the whole city because all of them do.
Yeah, I
Because
was
I
thinking
because
about
I
that
really do
because
believe that there's an underground parts of every city.
well, and in Kansas City, there's like a marathon or something, or like a some sort of run that you can run under the city in the tunnels. They like open it up, and I was like, I need to get in better shape so I can just go on this run.
Oh yeah, is it in Kansas City? Where is the place that has the it's like Metropolis or something like that or gosh, what is it? It's Subtropolis.
Oh, I don't know.
Is that in Missouri? You should look into that. I'm pretty sure that's kind of near where you said you're at. Is that it has it was like these old I think it was these old limestone mines, and it's like acres and acres and acres of like this place that's underground, and it's
Oh, I gotta look that up. You said Subtropolis?
Subtropolis. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, Kansas City.
yeah, and there's really famous pictures from Kansas City where like people who do like the mud flood research that
Yeah,
the buildings are just like there's dirt is as tall as like looks like 4 or 5 story buildings.
I might have to take a trip.
Definitely, that would be yeah, that'd be
That
got
would be
some
really cool.
good boots on the ground work. What's the other one we were talking about a little bit? You were talking about how you did one of your first podcasts about the Denver airport,
Yeah. So I went
and
to
I
Denver
was
Airport. I've flown in and out of there so many times. Like I tried to get underground. I tried. I met some people.
oh really?
You would not believe. Like, I had somebody message me on Instagram. I have a lot of listeners message me on Instagram. We talk back and forth. That's kind of how we connect. And so, me and this guy, we were going back and forth. He's like, I work at the Denver airport. I was like, bro, how much do I need to pay you to bring me in? He's like, they would fire me and we would go to jail. And I was like, okay, I don't want you to get fired, but could you just like leave a back door unlocked and I will go to jail? That's fine. I just need to get in. And he wouldn't. He wouldn't. But he did tell me that there's more than what he is allowed to explore.
Oh yeah. Well, see that was funny. So when I first started to like look into conspiracies, everyone had talked about you should do a video about the Denver airport. So I did like a 20-minute YouTube video, and I was just kind of reading all the weird conspiracies, and I just was, and it was the funny thing was that we were like a lot of people believe there's somewhat maybe could be an underground city under the Denver airport,
Yeah.
and that's one of the conspiracies. But then I said, but what if there's not? There's actually a underground city over where NORAD used to be, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. And I said, so a lot of conspiracies have wondered, could the two connect
Yeah. Oh,
underneath?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's
So,
pretty far, like the distance, but if it's a direct tunnel, it's really not that far. It's maybe an hour if it's direct.
right. But the funny part is that I was wondering aloud when I was doing that. And this is before I did any of this kind of research about like mud floods and all that kind of stuff and buried things. But I did actually say, I said, what if the tunnels were already there? What if they built the airport where it was because there was a way to get to other places? Because I remember hearing about like the locals were upset that this airport was a little more out of
So
town
far
than
out of there. Yeah.
yeah, then because the other one I guess was more convenient. It was like right by the city. So
Yeah.
this was about 20 minutes at least, 20 miles outside of like downtown Denver. So I said, but what if they built it out there because there was already an infrastructure of tunnels that made sense? And I was like, that actually makes sense because one of
Yeah.
the funnier parts about the videos when I was learning about it was that they supposedly built the Denver airport on a sacred Native American burial ground. Did you ever
Oh, I
read
didn't
about that?
know. But you know what's interesting
I
about the
found
Denver
some articles
airport
about that. Yeah.
is that they built just like they did with the cities. So they built it and then apparently it like fell down or something. So then they built another airport on top of it. Imagine
Right.
that.
Yeah. Supposedly they buried three buildings.
Yeah,
I did see that, like the plans. Of course, nobody could really confirm any of this.
of course. But
I
yeah, I
found
didn't
really
know.
interesting. Go ahead.
I heard that the reason, and of course this is just like the local conspiracy, that the reason they built it that far out there is because like the mayor or the governor at the time or the mayor of Denver had like a friend that wanted to sell the land and he got a good deal out of it and some but I think that the tunnel theory makes a lot more sense. I think that it could be both. Like
Hmm.
he probably had a friend that owns that land out there and like it's not really good for anything. I guess you could farm if you really tried, but it's like high plains farming. It's really rough. So, yeah, I
There's definitely something going on there. I mean,
oh yeah.
I think that there's no question about it. Even when they said they had the was it the electrical baggage carousel that was supposedly hundreds of millions of dollars that they just said, oh, it doesn't
It
work,
doesn't
and they
work and they
said
don't use it.
just whatever.
Yeah. Or
Like
like the
there's
time.
no way that like that just seems unbelievable that you invest that much money, you just wouldn't fix it
Yeah,
to make it
right?
work. So it's probably likely that that money went somewhere else,
Well, and there was a
went into the
time,
ground.
and I don't remember exactly how many planes it was. It was like seven in one day or something. And I probably got that number wrong. I don't have my notes up. But that seven airplane windshields got a crack in them, cracked all on the same day. And everyone's like, oh, it was a combination of the cold and the winds. And I was like, okay, I've lived in Colorado most of my life. I don't anymore, but I did for a long time. And I've never even seen a car windshield freeze and crack the way you're telling me that an airplane windshield did, seven of them on the exact same day. And airplane windshields are way more rugged
You
than
would
car
think they would have to be.
windshields.
You think they would have to be.
So you're telling me that these windshields just randomly cracked? Doesn't make any sense. What's going on?
Yeah, there's definitely some weird stuff happening there. But yeah, I started to wonder that. Yeah, that just the underground stuff. It just seems like that when as a child who kind of grew up in the 80s and I watched all the movies and like the war game stuff and there was always the hints of like there being underground domes and advanced military tech under the ground.
Hmm.
But it really is kind of funny to think about how that lady Catherine Fitch just kind of drops it. So they just spent $21 trillion doing some underground bunker tunnel system. But you're like, okay, so yeah, so how could they do that without everyone knowing about it? Because have you seen them
Because
do
the
road
tunnel's already
work
there.
in your cities? You guys ever seen road work done?
Oh yeah.
I live in Virginia and it takes a long time. I don't know about where you guys live, but it takes a long time. Now imagine them digging massive tunnels and paving it and doing all the things to fit it out with electricity and plumbing and oh, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that they could do that without everyone knowing about it. So that to me makes more sense is but could they do it without people knowing about it if the tunnel was already there? Maybe it was older. Maybe the underground city she's talking about already existed, and then the money goes toward again
Like just making it better.
modernizing,
Yeah.
repurposing it. And I think that that's what has been my best guess about some of these old world buildings is that when you see the dates, like again, you talk about some of the ones that have like the really crazy like 1 year timelines makes no sense.
Hmm.
But could that 1 year timeline come from the idea that it was founded and it was repurposed in about a year? Okay, so I could buy that, right? Like
Yeah,
maybe you found it,
absolutely.
maybe some of them were better off, and it's like so it wasn't built in a year, but they turned it from I don't know whatever like an old Roman temple to a post office or a city hall in a
Right.
year. Now I could possibly believe that. I mean, I think that's why when you continue to look at like the orphanages, the prisons, and the sane asylums, it's kind of interesting. They all look like ancient castles,
Yeah.
and they there's a specific style of all of these things are built like that. Yeah, to me, it's like you would never build a prison that looked like that. It seems way excessive
Right. Like why would you spend that much money just to like house prisoners?
or insane people. You wouldn't do that. So what if
No.
it was more like you have this big complex maybe we can use it for something that's practical. Because again, a lot of these ones specifically out on the West Coast, it makes no sense. Can you really think about it? So these cities are brand new. They just moved out there. And now they're building a prison and an insane asylum. At the same time they're building everything else. It's kind of like the people who are building the place, are they about to be put into the complex?
Well, and all of them are owned by the state or the government. They're all owned like you don't they're
Yeah.
not like privately owned. Everyone That's interesting. Because
Well,
then,
to
like,
think about yeah, to
I was always curious about that. Because, like, in Denver, you realize, okay, these settlers, like, I had this thought a lot of times. I'm like, settlers are coming across, right? And they've just gone through Kansas, which is pretty flat. And then you gone through, like, eastern Colorado, which is also very flat. And then you get there and you're like, whew, those Rocky Mountains, they're,
it's gonna be tough getting this wagon
whew,
across that.
I'll just settle right here, right? Because Denver makes sense. You're right there. You're like, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm done. But like
Yeah.
some of these other, like, okay, well, some people went across and they got to the other side and then Salt Lake City. You're like, why would you stop there?
The stuff in Utah is crazy. I said I was just out in Utah in November, and yeah, when you're driving through some of the passes in the mountains, and you can tell obviously you can tell where it had to be somebody had I don't know who did it, but some people carved out through those mountains or dynamited however they did it.
Yeah.
And but you're looking at it, and obviously it's humbling to drive through some of those places. You're just like, there's no way. There's no way that people in wagons with families went across
Just
these
went up
things.
and over these mountains. Like I could
There's
barely do it in a car.
there's no way. And of course, it was interesting. We were there the very beginning of November, and a snowstorm just came out of nowhere. And before
Yep.
you know it, it was in like the teens. Like we were in Nevada hiking, wearing like tank tops, and then we drove. I want to say it was about 90 minutes to 2 hours north, and it was literally 13 degrees
Yeah.
because a snowstorm just came up like that. And so you can imagine if you're trying to move your family here, and then some guy says, hey, let's build a temple that resembles a fairy tale castle. And that's what we're told they did. As soon as the Mormons got to Salt Lake, they started building this temple that is insane. That goes, I can't remember what they say, goes like 40 feet under the ground.
That's
And
crazy.
like, but I want to go back to something you said about how that most of these buildings, so you either have churches or you have government buildings.
Hmm.
Those are all the most impressive things.
Yeah,
But if you did pay attention in school, you learned that the founding fathers were all about limited government.
exactly.
And it's like they just started this country. So who's paying for all the city buildings?
It was the cities that were supposed to be paying for it. It was the people that lived there that were supposed to be paying for it. And that's what they
Right,
did
but I'm
typically.
saying, but it's like, but you think about it. So like before they're even collecting tax, before there's like income tax, before there's like anything, it's like we're told that they were allowed to go move out west because they were giving land away to a lot of these people.
Yeah.
So who's paying for everything?
Well, the country doesn't even have any money.
Well, I mean, the country. I mean, you really think about it. Like at this point, these are not even states. Then
Yeah, it's just
these are like
land.
these are like territories. So you're going across these territories. Like, so who pays for everything? Like, who pays for the roads? Who pays for anything when you're doing this? Who's paying for the port? I mean, I guess these are just questions I have. Maybe there's good
Yeah.
answers, but it doesn't make sense to think that when you see the Greco-Roman things, and this is actually something that this is a theory of mine, is that maybe the reason that there's Greco-Roman things everywhere is because that we're told that the Roman Empire was very centralized to this certain area. But what if it wasn't centralized? What if they went all the way to the Americas? They went all the way to the Far East and in Japan. There's Greco-Roman buildings everywhere. So
Maybe they ruled the world.
maybe they ruled the whole world, not
Yeah.
just the part that we thought that they knew about. So to me, it does seem like that those buildings are older. They came from a time before people, they were just miners, were out there. And then some people founded them and some people claimed them. And of course, the people who claimed them were the government,
Yeah.
Freemasons, the powerful
Illuminati.
religious leaders.
Mhm.
Yeah, all those kind of people. Those are the people who took over those buildings. And I can buy that, but I cannot buy like the story as we're told is that just people just pulling themselves by their bootstraps and who are just looking for the American dream decided, oh yeah, we want the American dream, but let's build everything to look like ancient Rome.
Right.
Not just in DC, but everywhere.
Everywhere. All
Everywhere.
across the country.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't the more you look into the history, the more you realize that nothing is the way they say it is. Everything is not what it seems. And the problem is the more you look into it, the more you realize it's everything. It's not like we were talking about. It's not one thing. It's not just, oh, well, that was a fluke. No, it's everything.
Yeah.
Everything's weird. Why can you not just be straight shooters? Why can't we not just like know what happened? What are you trying to hide?
Well, and yeah, so that leads me back to what I was saying that so if Jesus did come back, let's just say in the 700s, and there was 1,000 years, and then we're living in a time after that, it all sort of makes sense. It's like that gives you kind of the answer to what the question that everybody asks when you get to the weirder conspiracies. So why would they lie about that? Well, this kind of gives you evidence of why they would lie about everything. Let's just say, like, the flat Earth stuff is always the question. Like, so why would they lie about that? Well, what if this place is not like you think it is? What if the ends of the Earth is not just going around in a circle? What if there is like ends of it, where you could actually, you know, on the flat Earth map, you could have like even on here, there could be lands
Beyond.
outside of there, like outside of those things. Like, what if we weren't limited? That's why, people like Admiral Byrd talked about that there was lands as big as North America on the other side of the South Pole. Like, what does that even mean on a globe? To me, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
But if we are being lied to about the year we're in, maybe where we're at, you do have to. I'm not saying anything like so. Well, obviously, like there's a lot of conjecture in here. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of just questioning things, and I don't expect anyone to just trust me. And like I'm not saying you have to believe everything I'm saying, but I think to me as a Christian who says I believe the Bible's God's word, I believe it's true. I believe that Jesus said he was telling people he was coming back in a certain time. He told the truth and he knows what's up. So I believe that. So everything else I've had to question. So if he said he was coming back in this certain time period, I believe him. And I think that to me, it's only reinforced the fact that yes, it seems like they're lying, but maybe this is the reason they're lying. Some people think they're lying because they're trying to bring in the Antichrist, but it almost seems like it's too on the nose, right? Like if because everybody knows. Because I mean, obviously, if Hollywood's putting out Nicolas Cage and Left Behind movies, it's like that's not really a secret now, is it? But
No,
what if it's
everybody
pushing
knows.
you? What if it's pushing you in the direction where that's what they want you to believe is happening? Because we're not at that part of the book of Revelation. We're more toward the end, where the devil's deceiving the nations to gather them against, ultimately God's son and the saints who are maybe in a heavenly city. I know it's crazy sounding, but like, yeah, I think that's what's make the most sense to me. But we live in a pretty crazy world now.
Yeah, I don't think anything sounds crazy. I think that it's all like everything is possible. So that's kind of where I live. Like I mean, it sounds it makes a lot of sense. With all the things that I know, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I
So,
think it just, I think I'm sure like in this, with the podcast you have, and I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that I've done is just, we need to start re-examining the things that we know.
yeah.
And I
Oh
think the
yeah.
more you do that, because there's certain preconceived notions that we've just grown up believing, not because you've ever seen them or heard them. You just people have told you this is the truth. And then of course when you have like pivotal points in American history about like 9/11, and you have obviously the stuff with what happened in 2020, 2021, and then you say, well, if they didn't tell the truth about that, then maybe they don't tell the truth. And then so that's obviously where you kind of come back and you're like, well, I thought it was this way. And I think that's why I started to read my Bible with the kind of a fresh set of eyes saying, okay, I know this is the truth. And so I'm going to try to forget what I think that I know. I'm going to read this and what does this say? And then I'm going to try to re-examine the things that I think that I know versus this. And I'll be like, wait a minute, if this says this, what, like, can you guys show me
Right.
where
Why
you're
are you
getting your
teaching
information?
this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why are you teaching this? And most of the time I said they don't like being asked about questions like that. And I think in the truth community, I think that it's difficult if you don't have any kind of grounding. Of course, that's why I said I'm a Christian first and foremost. So I believe in something. And it does kind of make sense that if the Bible says this, the Bible says Jesus is going to come back here and then the devil's going to deceive people. And I can show you evidence that the elites, all the people in Hollywood and the music business, they seem to favor the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it does seem like this kind of lines up, but it's also it's kind of like, and I'm sure you've seen, it's also in the way that it's like the hidden in plain sight stuff, where it's like
Like the
it's
Statue of Liberty.
it's an open secret kind of like, but
Oh
they
yeah.
do it's kind of like they're rubbing you right in your faces, but they're not coming right out and telling you that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then you like you said, the Statue of Liberty. It's like, what if that really is a symbol of not Lady Liberty? What if that was a symbol of like Helios or Apollo, and that's kind of who Lucifer
Well, like
is
the
the
light
light bearer,
bearer.
the
Yeah.
light. I think even like the plaque on the Statue of Liberty says light illuminating the world.
Mm-hmm.
So illumination, Lucifer. And that's why when I was my buddies were asking me like, so do you think like LeBron really worships the devil? And I said, I think he would probably align closer to Lucifer. And they would say, oh, he's really not bad. He's he's of light and knowledge and good things. And I think that's how they see things. But of course, that's how the devil would do it, is that the Bible says Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about illumination and light, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's a good thing. But obviously, it's the false light, and obviously that's the light that leads to the world that we're living in now, which does not seem to be good.
No, and it seems like it gets worse every single year or every single day. I mean, last night my husband and I are laying in bed and he's like, "Well, did you hear about like this war or did you hear about like these people that are at each other's necks? Like what about this?" And I was like, "I don't think that we should talk about this right before we go to bed. I think that we should not talk about all the war." But I was also like, "Doesn't it feel like the whole world is at war right now?" Like,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that, so I think this is part of like that. If you want to get spiritual for 1 second, I do think that there's a lot of power in our intentions and our thoughts and in our feelings, because I do think that the dark forces, like the demons, I think they feed off our fear and our anxiety. And so if you really think about it, so is it possible that that is one reason they'd want you to think that the book of Revelation is about to happen and hasn't already happened? Is they want you to be acceptant that all these bad things are going to continue to get worse and there's nothing you can do. And then so you have people who are Christians coming out on social media and they're always trying to scare people about the end of the world every day. And
Yeah.
if you really think about it, let's just say that was true. Like, what are you supposed to do about that? Well, I
Nothing.
mean, if you're a Christian, I think you're supposed to be loving people and you're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to do until it all happens. Because if God said it will happen, you're not going to stop it. But I mean,
No.
what if you just said, "Hey, I'm not going to live in fear." Obviously, if you're in Christ, you shouldn't be worried about that anyways. But if you talk about it all the time, if you're sharing that, well, like you said, you can't go to bed thinking about that kind of stuff. So what if
No.
what kind of influence does that have on you, and what kind of influence do you have on others when that's all you're talking about? So like, what if Jesus already came back and he's Christ is King, he's on the throne right now, he's got it taken care of no matter what happens. I talked about that there's going to be a battle at the end. The bad guys lose. Jesus wins. So if you're in him, you're good anyways. And I started to think about that. Yeah, well, maybe that is part of what it is about. Like is this self-fulfilling prophecy? Is this manifestation, or is this another way just to make people passive? To say, oh, well, it's all supposed to be bad, so let's just sit on our hands, just wait for Jesus to take care of it. Or you could say, no, like maybe, like I said, if the devil has not been given a certain amount of time to do this, what if it could be longer? And what if I could say, well, I don't have to let everyone be deceived.
Yeah.
And I could try to tell them the truth, and I could try to tell them the truth in love. And I think I mean, that's my hope right now. I think that makes more sense. It's given me a lot more peace about some of the dark things. Like, I don't know if we have to accept it for just being how it has to be.
I think the more people that we wake up, the more people like the more we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, right now, and we've seen this with history, we've seen this with everything, like whatever explanation they give us, we're like, okay, cool. Well, what if we start to like actually use our brains a little bit and actually start to question things, question everything? And maybe we come to the conclusion that whatever explanation they gave us, yeah, okay, that's true. But more likely than not, you're going to come to the realization that whatever explanation they gave us, it's not usually the truth. And so to me, I'm like, okay, well, let's just start like telling or like having people start to question things. Because even if you don't believe whatever conspiracy I'm telling you this week, it doesn't matter. You're starting to doubt some things you're being told. And maybe not everything, and maybe you don't even know it consciously, but something is coming into your brain. You're like, I don't trust what's being pushed. And I think we saw a huge movement with that with COVID and with everything that happened in that time
Mm-hmm.
frame. And that was probably one of the best things that could have happened to us. And I know people are like, oh, COVID sucked. Yes, but look at all these people that have woken up. Look at all these people that are like starting to question what's being put out there. They're looking back in time. They're like, wait a second, that didn't make any sense either. Or they're looking forward. Like, I mean, we have the hurricane in Asheville. What? Like,
Yeah.
let's question that, And so
No,
all we can do
100%. Well,
is hope that people question things.
yeah, 100%. That's what one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 8:28, when it says that God can use all things together for our good who love him and are called to his purpose. So yeah, I'm a good example of that. It's like that all those bad things that happened in 2020 led to, like, me being brought low, but actually being able to stand back up, and obviously feeling like obviously I have my footing under me finally. Because yeah, it was super scary at the time, but yeah, exactly what you're saying. That what you're saying is that people think school tells you that intelligence is based on being able to regurgitate certain information, just be able to memorize things. But obviously, when you deal in the real world, the people who can critically think are the people you can tell that are actually smart. And so, I think like your brain is not per se a muscle, but obviously if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So the ability for people to actually, at least that's what I like to do. Is I've always done that from the very beginning, especially when I'd make my short stuff, is I'd ask people questions because I just want you to really think for yourself.
Yeah.
And you could disagree with me, but yeah, start to question these people. Obviously, you have no reason to trust them. And so you could disagree with some of our conclusions, but I really want people to think about it. And if I'm wrong, tell me why that there's evidence of a mud flood if there never was one. Tell me why there's evidence for that these cities are on old maps and things like, like ask the questions, get the
Yeah.
academic answer and come back with me, because certain things that obviously I can just disagree with the history books say, but certain things are not even written about in the history books. So that's what I'm saying. Like that, I would just want, I want people, I want a nation of people, I want a world of people who start thinking for themselves. And I think as soon as people do that, there might be another revolution coming.
Well, we know that obviously the way we're taught in school here, and I can't speak for other countries, but the way that we're taught in school here, you're not to critically think. You are supposed to just regurgitate, and that's because they want you to just be a worker. They don't want you to be very intelligent. They don't want you to think, because if you
Mm-hmm.
think, then you'll realize that you got the shit end of the stick.
Yeah. Yeah. What is
So,
it that what is it? Was it Rockefeller
yep.
or something like that who was saying that he wanted people just smart enough to be able to work the machines in the factories, but
Hmm.
stupid enough to not ever question it.
Exactly. And that's why he created the Department of Education. And he
Yeah.
funded so many universities. He's funded the health world. Like, we could go down that rabbit hole too, but I
Oh
know we
yeah,
don't have time
yeah.
for
Well,
that
I
today.
mean,
But
well, that's why people say, why, like, how could they all be in on this? It's like, yeah, because it's really not as many people as you think.
no, because everyone, like, the everyday people that you're thinking, like, there's no way this person's in on it. I don't think they are. I think they're just not thinking outside of the box that they've been given.
Mm-hmm. Just
So
like the
they're
movie The
like,
Matrix. It's
yeah,
just like that. I mean, like that. I said that it's kind of overdone, but it makes so much more sense. Is like that they don't even know that they're plugged in.
exactly. So, anyway, thank you so much for coming on. And I feel like we covered so many things, but it was such a great conversation. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, it was absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Be happy to come back on.
That'd be awesome. All right, JT, tell us where everyone can find you.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I go by JT Files JC on pretty much everything. So you can first and foremost probably check me out on YouTube. So that's where I'm doing most of my stuff. But you can find me. I have a podcast called JT's Mixtape. So if you want to find me on Spotify or Apple, and if you're on the socials, yeah, I'm JT's Files JC on on TikTok, Instagram, and if you want to find me on Facebook, actually, it's my real name. It's Joe Telford. So, but yeah, if you find me on anything, you can hit the link tree and you'll find me everywhere.
Awesome. And I will link all those in the show notes. That way, everyone has all of your information. They can easily find you. And I'll tag you on social media as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. But until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and we will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.